Welcome back to Stamps Old World UK, your home for deep dives into the stories, secrets, and hidden value behind the world's most fascinating postal treasures. Today's video is dedicated to one of the most intriguing and often misunderstood corners of stamp collecting, the world of vintage coin stamps and their modern market value. Whether you are a seasoned collector, a curious beginner, or someone rediscovering an old album from the attic, this journey will guide you through history, rarity, condition, and the price potential of classic stamps in today's collector's market. Before we begin, take a moment to look at the stunning stamp that inspired today's episode. This classic 10-cent coin stamp with the portrait of a historical figure wrapped in an ornate frame is a wonderful example of early design craftsmanship. The textured engraving, the symmetric border, and the stylized lettering all show the high level of detail that defines stamps of this era. These design traits are a major reason old stamps continue to hold both monetary and sentimental value, even as technology moves the world far beyond handwritten mail. Now, let us talk about how a stamp like this can be evaluated in today's market. Every collector knows that age alone does not determine a stamp's value. Instead, value is a combination of rarity, demand, historical significance, and above all, condition. A stamp that is well preserved, with crisp edges, clear imagery, and original gum on the back, can be worth several times more than a faded or damaged version of the same issue. For example, a common 10-cent issue in rough shape might sell for only a few dollars, while a clean, well-centered, premium-grade specimen can attract offers ranging anywhere from $10 to well over $50, depending on collector interest. These are not official catalog prices, but practical estimates based on common patterns seen in buyer behavior and collector trades. When evaluating older stamps, you must also consider something many newcomers overlook, and that is the significance of the issuing company or postal authority. Some organizations produced highly limited runs, while others issued huge quantities for everyday use. A stamp like the one we are examining today, featuring a detailed portrait under the banner of an insurance company or commercial issuer, often belong to a niche category sometimes referred to as revenue stamps or token stamps. These were not always used for mailing letters, but instead for tax purposes, insurance documentation, or commercial transactions. Because their usage was so specialized, many of these stamps survived in far lower quantities than mainstream postage stamps. That scarcity can raise the price, sometimes reaching values between $20 and $100 for uncommon variants when offered to the right collector. Another important factor is the visual appeal of the stamp. Collectors love elegance, symmetry, and historic illustration styles, and the stamp we are studying today delivers all of these qualities. The engraved portrait gives life to a time period when artists carved metal plates by hand to create stamp designs. This level of craftsmanship is rarely seen in modern printed stamps, which makes early engraved stamps increasingly desirable. When collectors search for additions to their albums, they often pay a premium for stamps with strong visual charm. A beautifully engraved 10-cent piece with sharp detail could easily push its market value higher, especially if it carries a unique color shade or design variant that is not widely available. Next, let us talk about one of the most powerful forces affecting value today: collector nostalgia. Many collectors in the modern market are motivated by a deep love for the eras these stamps represent. They see stamps not just as miniature artworks, but as time capsules from a world that no longer exists. As younger generations become increasingly interested in vintage aesthetics, the demand for old stamps has grown, particularly in the United States, the United Kingdom, and European markets. This emotional demand can lift a stamp's price range further. A stamp like the one featured in this video, depending on its condition and provenance, could realistically find a buyer willing to pay anywhere from $15 to $80 or more, purely due to its artistic and historical appeal. Now, let us discuss the idea of grading, because it plays a massive role in determining a stamp's value. professional grading services evaluate stamps based on centering, color strength, perforation quality, and condition of the gum. A stamp that receives a high grade, such as extremely fine or superb, can multiply in value rapidly. Without grading, a stamp might sell for $10. With top-tier grading, that same stamp could be valued at several times that amount. This system helps collectors make confident purchases and ensures that premium stamps maintain strong value in the market. We also need to address rarity variations. Sometimes two stamps look identical, but belong to different print runs. A small difference in ink tone, paper type, or watermark can be the key to unlocking a much higher value. If a collector discovers that their stamp is part of a rare print batch, the price can jump dramatically, even reaching into the hundreds in extreme cases. This is why collectors often use magnification tools, UV lamps, and reference guides to properly identify their stamps. A seemingly ordinary 10-cent stamp can surprise you if it comes from a rare series or if it carries an unusual design feature, such as misprints, color shifts, or reversed overprints. Another fascinating element in evaluating stamp value is the global market. While some stamps are more popular in the United States, others attract stronger interest in the UK, Asia, or continental Europe. A stamp like the one shown today, with its ornate design and historical flavor, tends to appeal to a broad international audience. Because of this, you might find the value of such a stamp fluctuating depending on where it's sold. In some regions, it might sell for $10 to $20, while in more competitive markets, it could easily rise to $30, $50, or even higher depending on the intensity of collector demand at that time. Let us also consider the role of auctions. Auction houses, whether online or physical, often create excitement around vintage stamps. When multiple collectors want the same piece, bidding wars push the value upward. Even a stamp estimated at $10 could end up selling for $40 or $50 if two motivated bidders are determined to own it. This is one of the reasons collectors enjoy the hobby so much. The market is alive, unpredictable, and full of pleasant surprises. A stamp sitting quietly in an old album for decades might suddenly become desirable again due to a revived collecting trend, an updated catalog listing, or a feature in a Philately magazine. Finally, for the collectors watching today's episode on Stamps Old World UK, the true value of a stamp goes far beyond the selling price. The beauty of this hobby lies in storytelling. Each stamp carries a fragment of history, a piece of culture, and a reflection of the world in which it was created. When you add a vintage stamp to your collection, you are adding history to your hands. You are preserving artwork and memory. The 10-cent coin stamp we examined today is a perfect example of how a simple piece of printed paper can represent craftsmanship, commerce, and the creative imagination of a bygone era.
Next up, the most recognizable and historically important stamps in early American philately, the United States 3-cent classic featuring the iconic profile of a historical national figure. This stamp, printed in a rich reddish shade with beautifully intricate engraved line work, has become a cornerstone collectible for stamp enthusiasts around the world. If you love discovering the story behind a stamp, the artwork that defines it, and the realistic price range it can achieve today in the collector market, then this episode is made especially for you. The first thing that makes this 3-cent stamp so special is its design. While simple at first glance, the engraving is filled with fine, intersecting lines that create depth and texture around the portrait. The circular frame is surrounded by ornamental patterns that demonstrate the high craftsmanship of early stamp production. This was an era when every line was carved with precision, every shading choice was intentional, and every stamp served as both a tool of communication and a miniature piece of art. For collectors today, this artistic value alone can influence price more than many people realize. Even a common early issue becomes far more desirable when the engraving remains sharp and the color strong. Now let us discuss condition, one of the biggest determining factors in today's market. A 3-cent classic that is heavily faded, worn, or thinned on the back may fall into the very low value range, sometimes only a few dollars due to condition issues. On the other hand, A well-centered example with bold color, clean margins, and minimal wear can rise significantly. The collector market often rewards sharp condition with much higher interest, and it is not uncommon for well-preserved specimens to sell anywhere from $10 to over $50, depending on the exact grade and eye appeal. The difference between a dull copy and a vibrant, high-quality one can be dramatic, which is why collectors inspect even the smallest details before placing a value. Another influencing factor is historical appeal. Classic American stamps from the mid-19th century remain extremely popular because they represent the early years of structured national mail service. These stamps carried letters during a time of huge social and political change, and many collectors feel a deep connection to the past when they hold one. That emotional value plays a surprisingly strong role in modern pricing. A stamp like this, with its instantly recognizable portrait and unmistakable color tone, continues to attract steady demand within both American and international markets. When a stamp carries emotional weight, buyers often spend more than they normally would, which expands the price range significantly. Rarity also plays a key part, although in this case, the 3-cent classic is known more for its varieties than for extreme rarity. There are many subtle variations in shade, plate wear, paper thickness, and printing characteristics that can influence value. For example, certain deeper or brighter color shades are more desirable and can increase the typical selling price. Some plates produced clearer engravings while others faded over time, creating collectible variations in detail quality. Even though the main stamp itself is widely known, specific rare varieties can become considerably more valuable. A collector who identifies one of these special printings may be surprised to find it worth several times more than a standard example. Another aspect that affects value is the stamp's margins. Early classic stamps were printed in large sheets without perforations, meaning collectors had to cut them apart manually. Because of this, margin size and symmetry are incredibly important today. A stamp with 4 wide, balanced margins is always more desirable than one cut too close to the frame. Margin quality can easily shift a stamp from a low-value piece of only a few dollars to a premium example worth significantly more. For many collectors, margins are one of the first details they check, and with good reason, because they dramatically influence visual appeal. Let us also consider the effect of cancellations. A lightly canceled stamp with a neat, unobtrusive marking is worth more than one with a heavy or messy cancellation. Some cancellations, such as fancy shapes or rare town markings, can even raise the value if they are historically interesting. However, for most early 3-cent stamps, collectors generally prefer cleaner cancellations that do not obscure the artwork. A stamp with excellent color, bright paper, and a clear, light cancellation can be particularly desirable and may reach the higher end of the value spectrum. The global collector market also has a strong influence. While American collectors naturally make up a large part of the demand for this stamp, interest from the UK, Europe, and Asia has grown steadily. The simplicity of the design, the age of the issue, and the recognizable profile make it appealing even beyond its home country. When demand spreads across multiple regions, the value becomes more stable and sometimes higher than expected. Depending on current collector enthusiasm, a nice example may fall within a broad range extending from $10 to as much as $80 for exceptional pieces. As with many classic stamps, auction dynamics can push the value upward. Even a stamp with a modest estimated price can exceed expectations if 2 collectors become determined to own it. In auction settings, passion often overrides logic, and prices rise as bidders compete. This excitement is one of the most enjoyable aspects of the stamp hobby, because it brings unpredictability and possibility to every sale. A 3-cent classic in striking condition might surprise everyone by achieving a strong price simply because it caught the eye of the right collector at the right moment.
Next up, the United States 5-cents classic, featuring the portrait of one of the most influential figures in early American history. This stamp, printed in a warm brown shade with exceptional engraved detail, remains one of the most admired and historically significant issues in the entire world of 19th century collecting. Whether you are a dedicated philatelist with years of experience or someone who has only recently discovered the beauty of old stamps, this deep exploration will guide you through the story, craftsmanship, and modern market value of this remarkable 5-cent classic. As we begin, take a moment to truly appreciate the design. The portrait sits within a perfectly balanced oval frame surrounded by rich ornamental detail that reflects the engraving artistry of the era. Every curve and line was carved by hand, giving this stamp a level of precision that modern printed stamps often lack. The text above and below the portrait stands out with bold clarity, carrying the strong identity of the early postal system. The overall look is elegant, dignified, and unmistakably historic. When collectors speak of the beauty of early American stamps, this particular 5-cent issue is often one of the first examples mentioned because it represents a perfect marriage of artistry, national symbolism, and early printing technique. Now, let us explore the incredible historical significance behind this stamp. This issue belongs to a period when the American postal system was transitioning into a modern structure, making stamps like this essential tools for communication across a rapidly expanding nation. Letters carried by this stamp traveled through an era of invention, growth, and political change. When a collector holds a 5-cent classic from this period, they are not just holding a piece of paper, they're holding a silent witness to the shaping of a country. That emotional and historical weight plays a substantial role in the stamp's desirability, and therefore in its present-day value. Speaking of value, the modern collector market places a strong emphasis on condition, and it is especially important for this 5-cent design. Because the stamp is highly prized, even small imperfections can affect its worth. Examples with faded color, heavy cancellation marks, torn edges, or thin spots typically fall into a more modest value range, sometimes only a few dollars if the condition is heavily compromised. However, a fresh and well-preserved example with rich brown coloring, sharp engraving detail, and clean margins can climb into a much higher bracket. In typical collector exchanges, a strong mid-grade example might settle somewhere between $10 and $50 depending on its condition, while especially clean and sharply presented pieces may rise beyond that. Condition truly is king for this issue, and the market reflects that reality very clearly. Another critical factor in determining value is centering. Early stamps were printed and cut in ways that often produced off-center or uneven bordering, which makes superbly centered examples extremely desirable to collectors. A stamp like this one, if it comes with a broad, balanced frame around the design and equal spacing on all sides, is considered premium quality. Such pieces naturally attract more attention and can reach significantly higher values. On the other hand, a stamp that is noticeably off-center, with one border extremely thin or touching the portrait frame, will be less valuable even if the color and artwork remain strong. Collectors often spend years hunting for the perfectly centered example, which adds a layer of challenge and excitement to collecting this issue. Color intensity also affects the market. The 5-cent classic was printed in various shades throughout its production, and collectors often prefer deeper, richer tones that highlight the engraved detail. A well-struck example with bold and warm color can appear dramatically more attractive than a faded copy, and this visual appeal translates directly into higher value. When examining this stamp under good lighting, collectors look for clarity in the portrait, crispness in the ornamental border, and strength in the lettering. These characteristics collectively increase its rarity and high grade and elevate its presence within any collection. Cancellations play a major role as well. Some collectors prefer lightly canceled examples where the ink does not obscure the portrait or the design. A gentle circular postmark that rests neatly on the corner or edge can make the stamp more visually appealing.
In contrast, very heavy cancellations that darken or smudge the portrait generally lower the value. However, certain rare or ornate cancellations, such as star shapes or uncommon provincial markings, can sometimes add interest and raise the value depending on collector preference. This creates an interesting dynamic where the right cancellation can either be a penalty or a bonus depending on its characteristics. The 5-cent classic also carries a strong presence in international markets. While American collectors naturally show the strongest interest, collectors across Europe, the United Kingdom, and parts of Asia admire this stamp for its artistic and historical importance. The portrait alone is instantly recognizable worldwide, and its relevance to early American history attracts international demand. That global recognition helps stabilize its value and sometimes increases prices when sought after by collectors outside the United States. When demand spreads beyond borders, the value range broadens accordingly, allowing premium specimens to achieve higher prices. Another fascinating part of this stamp's legacy lies in its varieties. Different printings produced subtle changes in plateware, paper type, and impression quality, which makes studying this stamp intellectually rewarding. Some collectors specialize in identifying minute variants that may be overlooked by casual viewers. These varieties can influence market values significantly. In some cases, a rare shade or plate position may raise the price dramatically even if the stamp appears ordinary at first glance. This adds a layer of mystery and discovery that makes this 5-cent issue endlessly interesting to study. Auction dynamics can also push prices higher than expected. When a collector encounters an outstanding example in superb condition, auction bidding can rise with surprising energy. A stamp that might normally sell for a modest amount can suddenly climb far higher if two determined collectors decide they simply must acquire it. These bidding wars highlight the emotional side of philately, where personal passion can outweigh typical pricing guidelines. This is why collectors love the unpredictability of auctions, and the 5-cent classic is known to perform well in such settings when offered in high grade. But while market value is important, the true heart of stamp collecting lies in appreciation. A stamp like this 5-cent classic holds significance far beyond its monetary range. It represents the craftsmanship of early engravers, the communication networks of the 19th century, and the legacy of a nation that used postage stamps as its miniature ambassadors to the world. Collectors who add this stamp to their albums often do so not because of its price, but because of the story it tells and the era it represents. To many, this stamp is a historical treasure worth preserving for future generations. Thank you for joining me today on Stamps Old World UK for this deep and detailed journey into one of the most iconic, classic American stamps ever produced. If you enjoyed this long-form exploration and want more episodes covering rare stamps, early postal history, and honest discussions of market value, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below with the next stamp you want to see featured. Until our next exploration, keep collecting, keep learning, and keep the world of classic stamps alive through your passion and curiosity.